20 veterans take their own lives every single day. But for Sergeant Maya Cruz, the most dangerous moment wasn't in combat. It was the silence of an empty airport terminal, realizing that after 2 tours, nobody was coming to take her home. And she was about to be seen by the last person she ever expected, a complete stranger with 3 little girls who would ask the one question that would change everything. Sergeant Cruz was a decorated Army engineer, home from her 2nd tour in Afghanistan. But the battle she faced now was one her training never covered, the crushing isolation of a homecoming to no one. This is the hidden reality for thousands who serve, returning to a world that moved on without them. And in that terminal, a single dad named Ben was about to walk his triplet daughters right into her solitary war. To understand the collision about to happen, you need to see the 2 worlds on a collision course. On one side, Ben Walsh, a man whose entire life was a carefully constructed routine of survival for 4. At 32, his career as a structural engineer had been derailed 2 years prior when his wife, Chloe, passed away after a short battle with cancer. Overnight, the blueprint of his life was shredded. He was now the sole architect for 3 6-year-old girls, Emma, the cautious leader, Sophie, the fearless adventurer, and Lily, the empathetic heart. His existence was a meticulously planned operation, pre-packed lunches, color-coded schedules, and a budget so tight it squeaked. The trip to Florida to see their grandparents was a monumental logistical feat, funded by a year of scrimping and a credit card he prayed wouldn't decline. For Ben, every day was about holding the line, providing normalcy and answering the question, when is mommy coming back? With a love that felt increasingly inadequate. On the other side of the terminal, sinking into a sterile bench, was Sergeant First Class Maya Cruz. Her world was built on a different kind of structure, discipline, protocol, and the unwavering bonds of a unit. As an Army combat engineer, her job was to build and breach, creating fortifications and clearing paths through hellish landscapes in Helmand Province. For 10 months, her home was the sound of generators, and her family was the 5 soldiers in her squad. But what sustains you in a war zone can become a ghost in the quiet. The military spends millions preparing you to deploy, but shockingly little preparing you to return to an empty apartment. A recent survey found that more than half of military couples feel lonely often, with no close friends or family nearby being a top factor. Maya was that statistic, personified. Her return was supposed to be a triumph. Her discharge papers were stamped, her bags were packed, and her squad had given her a roaring send-off. But during her final tour, her long-term relationship had fractured under the distance, ending in a terse email. Her parents lived across the country, and her friends' lives had all moved on, filled with marriages and milestones she'd missed. The Army had been her entire identity for 8 years. Now, stepping into the civilian world felt like stepping onto a foreign planet where she didn't speak the language. The noise of the airport, the laughter of reunions, the squeal of children seeing a parent wasn't background sound. It was a weapon, each happy echo a direct hit on her sense of belonging. The Yale study that identified loneliness as the main cause of suicidal thinking in older veterans wasn't just data to her. It was a chilling whisper in the back of her mind as she sat utterly still, tears cutting clean paths through the dust of 2 continents still on her boots. Ben was herding his trio toward their gate, a spectacle of matching pink backpacks and controlled chaos. Stay together, Pod Squad, Gate B12, eyes on the duck. The duck was a worn, yellow stuffed animal on his backpack, their designated rally point. He was focused on the clock, the gate, the need to find a bathroom before boarding. He was in the tunnel vision of single parenthood in public. He didn't see the soldier on the bench, but children see everything. It was Lily, the empath, who first noticed the woman sitting alone. She tugged on Ben's jacket. "Daddy, that lady is crying." Ben glanced over. He saw the fatigues, the tight bun, the slumped shoulders, a veteran. His brother had served. He knew the look. His immediate practiced dad instinct was to protect his girls from adult pain. "She's okay, sweetie. She might just be tired from a long trip. Let's give her some space." But Sophie, the adventurer, was already breaking formation. Maybe she needs a hug. Before Ben could react, Sophie had marched over with Emma and Lily instinctively following. Ben's heart sank. This was the exact kind of unpredictable social interaction he dreaded. Sophie stopped in front of Maya, her head tilted. "Why are you sad?" The direct, innocent question sliced through Maya's interior storm. She looked up, startled, wiping her cheek with a rough palm. She saw 3 sets of wide, blue eyes staring at her with pure, uncomplicated concern. She saw the dog tags around her neck reflected in their gaze. The military trains you for confrontation, for IEDs, for enemy fire. It does not train you for the disarmament of a 6-year-old's sincerity. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse from disuse and suppressed emotion. "I just came home from the army, and no one was here to meet me." The words hung in the air. Ben heard them. The logistical part of his brain computed. A soldier alone at an airport. The human part of him, the part buried under layers of grocery lists and mortgage payments, understood a deeper, more terrifying truth: isolation. He knew what it was to feel alone in a crowded room. He moved closer, not as a potential romantic lead, but as one struggling human recognizing another. "Hey, I'm sorry they bothered you," he said gently, placing a hand on Sophie's head. "We can let you have some quiet." Maya looked from the girls to Ben. She saw the fatigue in his eyes that mirrored her own, the navy jacket that was slightly frayed at the cuffs, the way he positioned himself slightly in front of his daughters. Not a threat, a protector. Something in his demeanor, the absence of pity and the presence of simple respect, made the next words fall out. "It's okay. They're not a bother. It's just you spend so long wanting to get home. And then you get here and you realize home isn't a place. It's the people. And when the people are gone," she trailed off, her composure cracking completely. In that moment, Ben Walsh made a decision that bypassed all his careful risk assessments. His flight was boarding in 20 minutes. His parents were waiting in Tampa. Every logical circuit said to offer a kind word and walk away. But he remembered the hollow echo in his own house after Chloe died, the silence so loud it hurt. He looked at this stranger who had served her country and now had nowhere to go. He looked at his daughters, who were now holding out a pack of fruit snacks they'd opened for her. The gap between his orderly world and her shattered one collapsed. "Where are you headed?" Ben asked, his voice low. Maya shook her head, a gesture of utter defeat. "A cab, I guess, to an empty apartment in a city where I don't know anyone." Ben took a deep breath. The announcement for his flight to Tampa echoed overhead. He made a choice that would unravel every plan he'd made for the past 2 years. "Our ride is here," he said, nodding toward his girls. "And we've got a car big enough for one more. My parents have a guest room that's just collecting dust. It's not much, but it's got people in it." Maya stared at him, disbelief wiping the tears from her face. "You don't even know me." "You served," Ben said simply. "And right now you shouldn't be alone, that's all I need to know." He extended a hand not to shake but to help her up from the bench. The triplets watched, holding their breath. Maya Cruz, who had faced down countless dangers by following orders and protocols, now faced a completely unknown mission, accepting a staggering act of kindness from a total stranger. Her hand, calloused and strong, reached out and took his. And in that instant, the trajectory of 2 broken lives shifted off their axis, hurtling toward a future neither could possibly foresee. But what Ben didn't know, what he couldn't have known as he helped her with her duffel bag, was that the battle Maya was fighting wasn't just in her mind. It was on paper, and a letter was waiting for her at that empty apartment. A letter from the Veterans Administration that would change everything and plunge them both into a fight for her very survival. The world Ben Walsh offered was a fragile oasis of normalcy, a Florida suburb where the biggest drama was a misplaced pool noodle. But the letter waiting at Maya's apartment wasn't about misplaced mail. It was a bureaucratic detonation that would shatter the temporary peace and reveal that her war was far from over. Ben's parents, Carol and George, were understandably stunned when their son arrived from the airport with an extra adult in tow. But they were from a generation that respected service. Seeing the uniform and the hollow look in Maya's eyes, Carol simply set an extra plate at the dinner table. For a few days, it worked. The girls adored Maya. She showed them how to fold a shirt with military precision, built an epic blanket fort they dubbed Forward Operating Base Pillow, and her quiet, steady presence was a calm counterpoint to their chaotic energy. Ben watched, a knot of unfamiliar emotion tightening in his chest. He saw his daughters laugh more freely. He saw Maya slowly unbend, a tentative smile reaching her eyes for the first time. It felt, against all odds, like a fragile healing was beginning for them both. But the past has a way of collecting mail. A neighbor from Maya's apartment building, alerted by the building manager, forwarded her pile of letters. Among the bills and catalogs was an official envelope from the Department of Veterans Affairs. The contents were a clinical, soul-crushing rejection. Her claim for service-connected disability for chronic back pain and traumatic brain injury, sustained when her convoy hit an IED, had been denied due to insufficient contemporary medical evidence. The VA's own data shows that on average, it takes more than 125 days to process an initial claim, and a staggering number are denied on the first try. For Maya, this wasn't just a denied claim. It was the lock on the door to her future. The chronic pain she'd been soldiering through meant steady, physical work was nearly impossible. The TBI explained the headaches, the insomnia, the moments of fog. Without the disability rating, she had no income, no access to the VA's specialized healthcare for her injuries, and no path forward. The apartment she couldn't face was now also financially out of reach. The crushing isolation of the airport terminal was now compounded by a terrifying, institutional abyss. She tried to hide it. She folded the letter and stuffed it in her duffel bag, falling back on the soldier's instinct to conceal weakness. But Ben noticed. He'd become hyper-tuned to shifts in mood, a skill honed by parenting triplets. He found her on the back patio late one night, staring into the dark, her body rigid with a tension that had nothing to do with the humid air. "The VA letter was bad, wasn't it?" he asked softly, not as a host, but as a fellow survivor of life's ambushes. Maya didn't turn, her voice was flat. "Denied. They say the headaches and the back issues aren't service-connected. Without that rating, I'm back to square one, but square one is gone." Ben sat beside her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, he asked a practical question. "What's the appeal process?" This was the pivot. Ben, the structural engineer, saw a problem with a faulty foundation. His mind, trained to find load-bearing solutions, shifted from providing temporary shelter to engineering a permanent fix. He spent the next 2 days buried in the labyrinthine VA website, veteran advocacy forums, and legal aid sites. The complexity was staggering. It was a system built on acronyms, contradictory forms, and a mountain of paperwork designed to break the spirit. But Ben had spent years fighting a different system, the healthcare bureaucracy during his wife's illness. He knew the language of appeals, the importance of a paper trail, and the necessity of a relentless advocate. He presented his findings to Maya like a project plan. "We need 3 things. First, a veterans service officer to represent you. I found a local one through the VFW. Second, an independent medical opinion linking your injuries directly to the IED incident. Your military medical records mention the event, but the exam was done in field. We need a civilian specialist to connect the dots. Third, and this is the hard part," he said, looking at her directly, "you have to stop pretending you're okay. We need to document everything. The pain levels, the sleepless nights, the moments of confusion, a daily journal." Maya recoiled. That's admitting defeat, it's weakness." "No," Ben said, his voice firm. "It's evidence. You documented everything in the Army. This is no different. This is the mission now, and you're not doing it alone." He had reframed the fight. It was no longer a solitary, shameful struggle, but a mission with an objective, a strategy, and a team. For the first time since she took off her uniform, Maya felt a sense of purpose. She had a battle to fight, and she had someone in her corner. The first major test of this new alliance came at the doctor's office. The neurologist, a brisk woman with a wall of diplomas, reviewed Maya's scant records. "The incident is noted," she said, but there's no follow-up MRI from that time. The VA is likely arguing the current symptoms could be from anything, stress even. Ben, who had come as her advocate, spoke up. He wasn't aggressive but precise. Doctor, if a steel beam in a structure is hit with a documented force and we later find cracks emanating from that exact point, we don't blame the weather. We attribute it to the force. The IED was the force. These symptoms are the cracks. We're asking you to make that professional connection. The doctor looked between them, saw the engineer and the soldier, and gave a slow nod. That's a compelling analogy. Let's get that MRI. But the real world doesn't pause for medical appeals. Money was a looming threat. Ben's finances, already stretched, couldn't support another adult indefinitely. Maya's savings were evaporating. The solution came from an unexpected place. George, Ben's father. A retired civil engineer himself, he had been quietly observing Maya's disciplined nature and her obvious skill with her hands. He also saw the Help Wanted sign at the local community center, which was struggling to launch a new after-school program for at-risk kids, but couldn't afford a dedicated coordinator. They need structure, George told Maya over coffee. They need someone who can turn chaos into order. Sound familiar? He proposed a deal. He would front the money for a modest part-time salary if Maya could design and run the program. It was a lifeline that preserved her dignity. It was work she understood, building something, leading a team, creating order from disorder. The children, many from unstable homes, responded to her clear expectations and quiet consistency. For Maya, it was a bridge back into the world, a reason to get up that wasn't tied to a war zone or a VA form. Meanwhile, the personal terrain between Ben and Maya was shifting in subtle, seismic ways. It wasn't a dramatic romance, but a slow, mutual recognition of shared resilience. They spoke in shorthand born of hardship. A glance across the dinner table could communicate an entire situation. He saw her fight through a migraine to read the girls a story. She saw him patiently explaining for the 100th time where Mommy was, his voice never breaking even though his eyes shone. One night, after a particularly brutal panic attack, a remnant of the TBI that left her trembling and disoriented, it was Ben who sat with her on the bathroom floor, not saying a word, just holding a cold cloth to her neck until the storm passed. She didn't have to explain. He just knew. This fragile new equilibrium was shattered by an outside force. A local news station, tipped off by a parent at the community center about the wonderful veteran running the kids program, decided to run a feel-good story. They filmed Maya leading an activity, interviewed a beaming Carol, and even got a soundbite from the triplets calling her Aunt Maya. The segment ended with the well-meaning reporter saying, "And it's all thanks to the kindness of a local single father who saw a soldier in need and opened his home." It aired at 6 o'clock. By 8, the comments section was a war zone. While many were supportive, a vocal, ugly minority erupted. "So a single dad just picks up a strange woman at the airport. Sounds risky. Is she really a veteran or just a freeloader with a good story? This is a woke PR stunt." The most vicious comments questioned Ben's motives as a father and Maya's character as a woman. The private sanctuary they had built was suddenly on display, judged, and picked apart by strangers. For Maya, who had faced enemy fire, this was a different kind of attack, one on her integrity and her place in this fragile new family. For Ben, it was a nightmare of his worst fears, his judgment being questioned and his girls being exposed to ugliness. The crisis peaked when a particularly nasty comment, suggesting a child services call should be made about the unstable environment, sent Ben into a silent, cold rage. Maya found him staring at his laptop, his knuckles white. "I should have never put you on that plane," he whispered, his voice thick with guilt. "I brought this on us, on the girls." Maya, drawing on a different kind of courage, the kind needed to hold a position under fire, knelt in front of him. "Listen to me," she said, her sergeant's voice cutting through his spiral. "You gave me a mission when I had none. You are the strongest man I know. This," she gestured to the screen, "this is just noise. We have a real mission. The VA appeal, the girls, this family. We hold the line." In that moment, the last barrier between them fell. It was no longer a rescuer and the rescued, or a host and a guest. They were allies in every sense of the word. The public scrutiny, instead of breaking them, forged their bond into something unbreakable. They decided to fight back, not with anger but with truth. Ben contacted the news station not to complain but to offer a follow-up story. The real story about the fight with the VA, the silent epidemic of veteran loneliness, and the power of community. The station, sensing a deeper narrative, agreed. The night before the interview, as they prepared their talking points, a certified letter arrived. It was from the Veterans Benefits Administration. This was it, the decision on her appeal. Maya's hands shook so badly she couldn't open it. Ben took it, his own heart hammering. He slid his finger under the flap and pulled out the single, fateful page. His eyes scanned the dense legal text, searching for the verdict. He went very, very still. His face gave nothing away. Maya watched him, her breath held, the entire future of her life hanging on his next expression. The camera crew would be there in the morning to film either a victory or a very public, devastating defeat. Ben finally looked up from the letter, his eyes meeting hers, and in them she saw a storm of emotion she couldn't decipher. The answer to her entire future was in his hands, and he hadn't yet spoken a word. Ben finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "It's approved." The words should have been a victory cry, but the way he said them held no joy. He handed her the letter. Maya's eyes raced over the text. She found the rating, 30%. It was a lifeline, but a thin one. It meant a modest monthly stipend and access to VA care, but it was a fraction of what her injuries warranted. The letter stated the higher rating was denied due to a lack of evidence for the severity and persistence of her symptoms. The VA had acknowledged the war broke her, but was only willing to pay for a few of the pieces. Maya looked up, a fractured smile on her face. "It's something. We can appeal again for a higher rating." Ben nodded, but his mind was already ahead. The news interview was now a double-edged sword. They could present this as a partial victory, a step forward, or it could be seen as proof the system was still failing. They decided on honesty. The next morning, with cameras in the living room, Maya and Ben sat side by side. Maya, in a simple button-down shirt, her dog tags visible, spoke with a clarity that stunned the reporter. She talked about the IED, the chronic pain, the fog of TBI. She held up the approval letter, then the first denial. "This isn't about a check," she said, her gaze steady on the lens. "This is about being seen, truly seen. The Army taught me that leaving a wounded soldier behind is the ultimate failure. I feel like my country is still trying to decide if I'm worth coming back for." Ben spoke next, not as a hero, but as a witness. "I'm just a guy who saw a human being in pain. The real battle shouldn't be fought alone on your couch with a stack of forms. It should be fought with a team behind you." The segment aired that night. The response was nuclear. It went viral. Thousands of comments flooded in, but this time they were overwhelmingly from other veterans and their families sharing identical stories of denial, delay, and despair. #Seen the Soldier began trending. Offers of pro bono legal help poured in from veteran advocacy groups, but with the spotlight came a more focused heat. A week after the segment, an official-looking email arrived in the community center's inbox, CCing the board of directors. It was from a law firm representing a concerned group of donors. It cited the media circus and the unstable medical condition of their program coordinator, suggesting that Maya's presence posed a potential liability and was harming the center's reputation. They strongly recommended her dismissal. It was a targeted, professional hit. The center's director, a kindly older woman named Patricia, was mortified but terrified of losing funding. She called Maya into her office with tears in her eyes. "It's not fair," Patricia said. "The kids love you, the program is working, but these people, they have influence. I can't risk the whole center." Maya felt the ground vanish beneath her once more. The job was her anchor, her proof she could contribute. Ben was furious. He traced the law firm back to a network of conservative political donors, one of whom was a local businessman and veteran named David Reeves, who had been publicly critical of the victim narrative in modern veteran affairs. This wasn't random internet trolling. This was a calculated move to silence her. But the "wait, it gets worse" moment hit 2 days later from a direction none of them saw coming. A sleek car pulled into the Walsh family driveway. Out stepped a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed, her face a mask of prim concern. It was Alina, Ben's mother-in-law, Chloe's mother. She had never fully accepted Ben's role as sole parent, and her visits were rare and tense. She had seen the news segments. "Benjamin," she said, not bothering with a hello. "We need to talk. Inside." Living room, she laid out her case with cold, grandmotherly precision. The media attention was unseemly. Bringing a troubled stranger, a soldier with psychiatric issues no less, into a home with 3 small girls was profoundly irresponsible. She had spoken with a family law attorney. "My daughter entrusted you with those children. This current situation could be construed as an unstable environment. I'm here to suggest strongly that the girls come stay with me in Sarasota for a while, until this all blows over." Ben saw red. This was his deepest fear, weaponized by someone he couldn't simply dismiss. This was family. Maya, listening from the kitchen, felt a panic more profound than any she'd felt in combat. She was no longer just a liability to a job, but a threat to the children she'd come to love. The institutional battle with the VA was now a brutal personal war for the family itself. That night, Maya packed her duffel bag. Ben found her in the guest room. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done weeks ago," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Your mother-in-law is right. I'm a grenade with the pin pulled. I can't let you lose your girls because of me." Ben put his hand on the bag. "Maya, look at me. Alina is using you as an excuse. She's been looking for one since Chloe died. If you leave, you're giving her exactly what she wants. You're proving her point. We stand together or we fall apart, all of us." The next morning, Ben did something he'd avoided for 2 years. He called a family meeting with Alina, George, and Carol present. He spoke not as a defensive son-in-law, but as a father and a man. "Alina, you loved Chloe. So did I, but Chloe isn't here. I am. And my job is to raise our daughters in a home filled with love, respect, and courage. Maya has shown more of those qualities than anyone I've ever met. She is not a problem to be solved. She is part of this family. If you try to use her to take my children from me, you will lose. You will lose access to them, and you will lose me." It was the hardest line he'd ever drawn. Alina left, silent and furious. The immediate threat was quelled, but the cost was a permanent fracture. The pressure, however, had reached a boiling point within Maya. The combined forces of the legal threat, Alina's attack, and the relentless scrutiny triggered a catastrophic PTSD episode. Alone one afternoon, a car backfired on the street. To her, it was an IED. The world dissolved into flashbacks. The smell of burnt metal, the screams on the radio, the taste of sand and blood. When Ben and the girls came home from the park, they found the living room in disarray, a table overturned, and Maya locked in the bathroom, sobbing and unresponsive. The girls were terrified. Ben's hard-won stability crumbled in the face of this invisible injury. He got the girls to Carol's house, then managed to coax Maya out. She was shattering, guilt-ridden. "See," she wept. "This is what I am, a broken thing. I'm scaring them." Ben held her, his own heart breaking. "You're not broken, you're wounded, and we get you help." He used the new VA healthcare access to get an emergency appointment with a trauma specialist. It was the beginning of a long road, but it was a road with a guide. Yet David Reeves, the businessman, wasn't finished. He went public. He wrote an op-ed in the local paper questioning the validity of late-blooming PTSD claims and the wisdom of romanticizing unpredictable elements in our communities. It was a veiled but clear attack on Maya and Ben's story. The public debate turned toxic, splitting the town. The community center, buckling under donor pressure, officially let Maya go. They were now facing a legal threat, a smeared reputation, a lost job, and the daily, exhausting management of Maya's trauma. They were at the lowest point, besieged on all sides. It was George, the quiet engineer, who found the pivot. He had been researching David Reeves. The man owns a big construction firm, George told Ben and Maya over blueprints spread on the kitchen table. "He's bidding on the contract to rebuild the old Riverwalk Pier. It's a public works project, funded partly by the city, partly by a state veterans memorial grant." He pointed to a line in the grant requirements. It says the project should, where possible, prioritize contractors who demonstrate a commitment to veteran employment and community. A slow, hard smile spread across Ben's face. He saw the move. Reeves was publicly attacking a veteran's credibility while bidding for veteran-focused money. It was hypocrisy they could expose, but not with more words, with action. Ben and Maya spent the next 72 hours working tirelessly, not on defense, but on a stunning counteroffensive. Using her VA approval letter as credibility, Ben's engineering credentials, and the overwhelming public support from their viral moment, they drafted a proposal. They would form a nonprofit, a partnership, Walsh and Cruz Community Builders. Their first project, a volunteer-driven rebuild of the town's dilapidated Veterans Hall, creating a dedicated space for support groups, counseling, and job training. They presented it as a solution, not a protest. They secured a pledge of skilled labor from every local veteran and union member who had been moved by their story. They went to the city council with renderings, a budget, and an army of public support. On the day of the council meeting to award the Riverwalk contract, the chamber was packed. David Reeves sat confidently with his team. Ben and Maya sat in the front row, not as petitioners but as citizens. When public comments were opened, Maya stood. She didn't talk about her pain. She talked about the mission. "Service doesn't end when the uniform comes off," she said, her voice ringing clear. "We want to keep building, keep serving. But we need our community to see us not as problems, but as partners." Then, one by one, veterans and neighbors stood to speak in support of their project. The council was visibly moved. When it came time to discuss the Riverwalk contract, a councilwoman directly asked David Reeves how his firm, in light of his public comments, fulfilled the grant's commitment to veteran community support. He stammered, talking about hearing quotas. It fell flat. The council postponed the vote, a clear signal his bid was in jeopardy. Reeves shot a look of pure venom at Ben and Maya as he left. They had won the battle of public opinion, but they had made a powerful, vindictive enemy. Exhausted but victorious, they walked out of City Hall into a cool evening. For the first time in months, they felt the tide might be turning. They had a new mission, a purpose bigger than their own survival. Ben slipped his hand into Maya's. She didn't pull away. The connection between them, forged in grief, tempered in battle, had become the foundation of everything they were building. As they drove home, a new letter arrived via express mail. This one wasn't from the VA. It was from David Reeves's law firm. The subject line, "Intent to file defamation litigation." The war wasn't over. It was just entering a new, more dangerous phase. They had taken the fight to the enemy's doorstep, and now the enemy was firing back with everything he had. The next move would decide not just their future, but the fate of the community they were fighting to build. The defamation lawsuit was a scare tactic, a billionaire's attempt to bury a problem with legal fees. But David Reeves had fundamentally misjudged his opponents. He saw a broke single dad and a damaged veteran. He didn't see a united front that had already survived far worse. Instead of folding, Ben and Maya took the letter to the pro bono lawyer from a veterans advocacy group who had reached out after the news segment. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah Chen, laughed when she read it. "This is garbage. It's a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, designed to silence you. And in this state, they're very hard to win." She advised a bold move. They would not just defend. They would countersue for malicious prosecution and intentional infliction of emotional distress, pointing to the targeted campaign that cost Maya her job. But their true weapon was the community they had unknowingly built. Ben posted a simple, honest update on the social media page that had followed their story. "We're being sued for speaking our truth. We won't be silenced, but we need your help to prove that kindness and honesty are worth more than intimidation." He linked to a legal defense fund. The response was staggering. Small donations poured in from across the country, most under $50, many with notes from veterans or single parents. The local news picked up the new development, framing it as David versus Goliath. Public pressure mounted. The city council, now wary of Reeves, quietly awarded the Riverwalk Pier contract to a different firm. Reeves was losing on every front. The final blow came from an unexpected ally. Eleanor, Ben's mother-in-law, had been watching silently from Sarasota. The sight of her son-in-law fighting not just for his family, but for a stranger's dignity and the viciousness of the attack against him began to crack her hardened perspective. She saw her granddaughters on a video call, talking excitedly about helping Aunt Maya build a clubhouse for soldiers. She saw the love, not the instability she feared. One afternoon, she called Ben. Her voice was different. "I've been wrong," she said, the words clearly costing her. "Chloe would be proud of the man you are, of the father you are. If you'll allow it, I'd like to contribute to your legal fund, and I'd like to come for a visit, a proper one." It was the most profound victory of all, the healing of a family fracture they thought was permanent. With the public tide turning decisively, David Reeves's lawyers quietly approached with an offer: drop all claims if he dropped his suit. Sarah Chen negotiated fiercely. The final agreement stated that all parties would walk away, with Reeves also making a sizable, anonymous donation to the Walsh and Cruz Community Builders nonprofit. It was a surrender disguised as a settlement. The legal war was over. Now they could focus fully on their mission. The plans for the Veterans Hall renovation were finalized. The volunteer sign-up list filled 3 pages. The local hardware store donated materials. On the first day of the rebuild, over 50 people showed up with tools: veterans, neighbors, firefighters, even a few city council members. Ben, wearing a hard hat over his graying hair, coordinated the construction with George. Maya, in jeans and a faded army t-shirt, directed teams with a quiet authority that inspired effortless respect. The triplets had their own tiny work gloves and were in charge of supervising the paint color choices. The sound that filled the old hall wasn't the silence of isolation Maya had known at the airport. It was the roar of saws, the beat of hammers, and the laughter of a community building something together. In the midst of this tangible progress, the VA process, that slow-turning wheel of bureaucracy, finally delivered a decisive verdict. A higher-level review prompted by the new medical evidence and likely influenced by the public attention upgraded Maya's disability rating from 30 to 70%. The letter arrived with no fanfare. The back pay was significant, a life-changing sum that meant financial security. But for Maya, the number was less important than the validation. The sentence read, "Service connection for post-traumatic stress disorder and major depressive disorder is granted." For the first time, the government had put in writing that the war had left a lasting wound on her mind, and that it was their responsibility to help heal it. She was finally, officially seen. That night, under the half-repaired roof of the Veterans Hall with the smell of sawdust in the air, Ben and Maya sat on a stack of drywall. The girls were asleep at home with Carol. "What happens now?" Ben asked, looking at the transformed space around them. "I was thinking," Maya said, her voice soft. "This hall, when it's done, it'll need a full-time director, someone to run the programs, connect people with services, a real mission." She paused. "And I was also thinking, that guest room at your parents' house is a little far from town." Ben's breath caught. Maya continued, looking at her hands. "I love your family, Ben, all of it. The chaos, the schedules, the love. I want to be a part of it, not as a guest, as part of the team, permanently." Ben didn't answer with words. He took her hand, the one that had steadied a rifle and now held a hammer, and he placed a small, cold object in her palm. It wasn't a ring. It was a simple, brushed steel key. "I had it cut weeks ago," he said, his voice thick. "To our house. I was just waiting for you to be ready to call it yours." Maya closed her fingers around the key, the metal biting into her skin. It was the most profound proposal she could imagine. Not a question, but an offering, a home. She leaned her forehead against his, tears streaming down both their faces. It was a promise forged in shared survival, a partnership stronger than any legal document. The ribbon cutting for the newly christened Community Anchor Center was held on a bright Saturday morning 6 months later. The local press was there, but this time it felt like a celebration, not an invasion. The hall was buzzing with activity, a coffee group for veterans in one corner, a resume workshop in another, kids from the after-school program painting a mural on the back wall. Maya stood at the podium, Ben beside her, the triplets fidgeting in matching dresses nearby. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who had become her battle buddies, her community. 8 months ago, she began, I landed at an airport believing I had nowhere to go. Today I'm standing here because one family taught me that home isn't a place you find, it's something you build together. She reached down and took Lily's hand. We built this. After the ceremony, as people milled about, an older man in a VFW cap approached Maya. He had tears in his eyes. My son came home 2 years ago, he said, his voice rough. He's been in his basement ever since. I'm gonna bring him here tomorrow. In that moment, Maya understood the full payoff. Her pain had purpose. It had become a bridge for someone else. The final, surprising detail of their journey came in the form of a formal letter, not from the VA or a lawyer, but from the Office of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. It was an invitation. The story of the Community Anchor Center, of a veteran and a civilian turning personal struggle into public service, had reached the highest levels of the department. They wanted Maya and Ben to consult on a new national initiative aimed at streamlining the transition from military to civilian life, focusing on community integration and peer support. The lonely soldier in the terminal was now being asked to help rewrite the handbook for homecoming. That evening, the Walsh Cruz family, a title now used comfortably by everyone, ate dinner at their kitchen table, the one that had seen panic attacks, legal strategies, and now simple spaghetti. The conversation was a happy chaos of school projects and building plans. Ben watched Maya laugh at something Sophie said, the light finally reaching all the way to her eyes, no longer shadowed by the horizon of a war zone or the dread of an empty apartment. He had set out on a trip to Florida to give his daughters a visit with their grandparents. He had returned with a partner, a mission, and a family made whole in a way he never could have designed. Maya looked across the table at him and smiled, her hand resting on the steel key she wore on a chain around her neck, next to her dog tags. The war within her wasn't gone, but it was no longer a solitary fight. She had a family to come home to every single day. So what's the real lesson in the story of Ben and Maya? It's not that one act of kindness fixes everything. It's that one act of courage, the courage to see someone, truly see them, can start a chain reaction that rebuilds a life, a family, and even a community. We began with a staggering statistic, 20 veteran suicides a day, with loneliness as a leading cause. Maya Cruz was on the precipice of becoming a part of that number. Ben Walsh, drowning in his own grief, could have walked by. But he didn't. He saw a soldier, but more importantly, he saw a person. And in that moment, he chose connection over caution. Their journey exposes a brutal truth. Our systems are often designed to manage problems, not heal people. The VA's labyrinth, the court of public opinion, the cold calculus of liability, these are machines built for efficiency, not empathy. The real work of healing happens in the messy human space between those systems. It happens at kitchen tables, on job sites, and in the stubborn refusal to let someone fight alone. Ben and Maya didn't just find each other. They built a bridge between two isolated worlds, the military and the civilian, the grieving and the lost, and showed that the strongest structures are made of trust, respect, and shared purpose. This story forces a question onto all of us. In a world that encourages us to look away, to mind our own business, to fear the stranger, where can we choose to see? Where can we be the unexpected bridge for someone who feels stranded? It doesn't require grand gestures. It requires the willingness to ask, "Are you okay?" and mean it. It requires the strength to say, "I don't have all the answers, but you don't have to be alone." The battle against isolation isn't won in government buildings or with policy papers alone. It's won in airport terminals, in neighborhood coffee shops, and in the quiet decision to extend a hand instead of turning a page. Ben and Maya's story continues. The Community Anchor Center is thriving, a living testament to what happens when we build with people instead of for them. Their family is a blend of chosen and given, a powerful reminder that love is not a finite resource but a renewable one, made stronger by every storm it weathers. The most expensive suits, the biggest bank accounts, the shiniest accolades, they often cover the deepest poverty of spirit. True wealth is measured in the strength of your connections, the depth of your integrity, and the courage of your compassion. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your own life or a battle you faced, let me know in the comments below. Share your story of an unexpected connection or a time you were seen when you felt invisible. I read every single one. Please, like this video to support the channel and help more people find stories that matter. Share it with a friend who needs a reminder that hope is a verb and that good people are still out there, building bridges in the dark. Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a documentary that challenges you to look at the world and the people in it a little differently. Thanks for watching. Remember, sometimes the most heroic mission isn't across the world, it's across the room. See you in the next one.